The city begins in silence. Not the gentle silence of night, but the suffocating kind that presses against the skin like damp cloth. From the ramparts, torchlight flickers over stone battlements, casting long shadows that seem to move on their own, as though the walls themselves breathe with dread. Sentries pace in heavy rhythm, their eyes hollow, their hands numb against the chill iron of spear and shield. Beyond the gates, the horizon burns with a different fire. Enemy campfires scattered like a constellation of orange stars. Each ember is a promise, of hunger, of fire, of steel yet unsheathed. And the city knows. It feels the heat of those distant flames even as its own hearths grow cold. Inside the walls, life shrinks into whispers. Streets echo faintly with the clatter of pots, thin as a dying heartbeat. Women murmur prayers before crumbling icons, their fingers trembling on splintered wood. Cloaks are pulled tighter as winds sweep through alleyways, bringing the taste of frost to cracked lips. The smell of rancid meat seeps from storerooms long emptied too quickly. Dogs prowl the shadows, scavenging bones where feasts once rang, their growls a cruel parody of the laughter that used to fill these stones. The bells toll. Once they called the faithful to prayer, to feast, to union. Now their iron tongues are soaked in dread. Each strike signals another breach, another corpse, another day endured beneath a sky that has forgotten mercy. Mothers bend in candlelight, sewing shrouds from fraying linens. Children curl like shadows in smoke-darkened corners, listening for the thunder of drums that mean death is nearer. The elders, those who have lived through sieges past, speak with voices cracked by age and memory. Starvation, they say, kills slower than the blade, but it kills with certainty. And then, a sound shatters the fragile quiet. A door slamming against stone, loud as a broken heart. In that instant, silence becomes unbearable, the city itself recoiling. This is no longer war. It is a descent, a slow unweaving of spirit, a test of flesh and soul as cruel as any sword. Nights are the worst. The enemy fires glow brighter in the darkness, stretching across the fields like a cruel constellation, each flame a star that mocks the heavens. Families huddle together in single rooms, clinging not to warmth. There is none left, but to the illusion of togetherness. Hunger gnaws at their bellies, an invisible beast that feeds endlessly. Children cry until they have no strength to cry anymore. Mothers rock them, whispering lullabies that have lost all power. The lullabies falter, dissolve into sobs, then silence. The soldiers fare little better. On the walls, they whisper to each other of home, of bread, of sunlight not filtered through smoke. They grip their weapons with calloused hands, but even steel begins to feel heavy when the heart has grown light. Some pray, eyes fixed on the stars, searching for signs that heaven still listens. Others curse the saints for their silence. The more desperate dream of desertion. But where is there to run? Beyond the gates lies only the noose of fire and steel, waiting to tighten. Inside the churches, candles burn low, their wax dripping like tears. Priests chant psalms that echo hollowly against stone arches. But faith is a fragile vessel. The holy icons look back at the starving faithful with wooden eyes, unable to answer the hunger that eats through bone. And yet, some still kneel, still bow their heads, as though clinging to ritual is the last thread keeping them from falling into despair's abyss. Days stretch like centuries. Each hour blurs into the next, defined only by the tolling of bells and the bitter tally of loss. The baker's ovens are cold. The wells taste of rust and fear. The markets are bare except for the hollow-eyed beggars who line the stones like statues of despair. Once proud merchants now clutch rags, offering useless coins for crumbs of bread. Even the rats, once scorned, have become prey. Shadows in the alleys dart with hunted grace, and children chase them with stones and empty hands, their laughter edged with desperation. The enemy waits, patient, methodical, relentless. Their drums sound at intervals, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast. The city cannot see their faces, only their fires. But the people feel their presence, pressing closer with every passing night. Siege is not a battle of swords, but of patience, and patience is the cruelest weapon. Then comes the rain, cold, relentless, drumming on the rooftops like 1,000 iron fingers. The streets turn to rivers of mud, carrying filth through the alleys, soaking the frail cloaks of those who still dare walk outside. The rain should be salvation, but it brings only rot. Food spoils faster, walls crack deeper, the air fills with the stench of damp decay, and in the dark, fevers rise. Children shiver with burning brows, their cries muted by exhaustion. The old slip quietly into death, their bodies wrapped quickly, without ceremony, because there is no time, no strength, no linen left. And yet, even in this descent, sparks remain. A soldier on the wall shares his last crust of bread with a boy too weak to stand. A mother tells stories by candlelight, weaving heroes out of memory to shield her children from fear. A priest, voice trembling, raises a hymn against the thunder of rain and drums, his song frail but unbroken. These are the threads that keep the city from unraveling entirely. Threads of love, of defiance, of faith stubborn as stone. But hunger is a beast that does not sleep. Each day, it claws deeper, tearing away the layers of humanity. Neighbors turn on neighbors, suspicion festers, whispers of betrayal crawl like rats through the streets. Whose cellar hides stolen grain? Who eats while others starve? Justice bends, morality thins, and soon survival becomes the only law. And still the bells toll. Their iron tongues echo into the night, each sound a reminder that time itself has become the enemy. Siege is not measured in victories, but in how long the city can endure before its heart breaks. From the ramparts, one looks out again. The campfires still burn. Torches still flicker in the distance, unmoving, unyielding. But now they no longer look like stars. They look like eyes, watching, waiting, blinking with cruel patience across the black horizon. And in that watching, a question lingers, cold as the night wind. How much longer can the city endure before silence gives way to screams? A crimson dawn spills over the city walls, painting the battlements in blood before the first sword is drawn. The sky itself seems to take sides, its fire staining stone as if warning those who stand beneath it that death has already chosen its feast. Archers raise their bows in perfect silence, wood groaning under the strain of the drawstring, every arrow trembling like a held breath. In the mist below, unseen eyes watch. In that trembling, there is both terror and resolve. Men who know the moment they release, they surrender part of themselves to fate. Beneath the walls, the city is already dying. Wells turned sour, bread ground into dust between desperate hands, smoke thickening the air where thatched roofs are burned by their own people to deny an enemy shelter. The streets echo with the hollow cries of children too hungry to weep properly, their sound thinner than the moan of wind through the shutters. Rats claim dominion now, bold and fat, darting across cobblestones like shadows with teeth. Their squeaks ring out, mocking and shrill, as though they laugh at the suffering of the proud and starving. In the heart of the city, the cathedral looms, a great stone ribcage against the sky. Within, chants coil upward, desperate voices straining to drown out the thunder of rams striking gates. Each crash against the doors is answered by a trembling hymn, a contest of faith against force. The incense clings thick in the air, yet beneath its sweetness lurks the smell of sweat, of fear, of sickness. Candles sputter against drafts, their flames bowing like prisoners awaiting the axe. At the edge of the nave, a child kneels in the dust, clutching a wooden soldier whose paint has worn away. The little figure's face is chipped beyond recognition, as though it too has endured siege. The child whispers to it, pressing it close against his chest, as if its silence could offer protection from the chaos beyond. In this small act, the whole city is mirrored, clinging to symbols, to faith, to the belief that something, even a toy, might outlast the storm. Outside, the drums never stop. Low, patient, steady, each beat a promise. Not the promise of attack, but of waiting. For it is not only steel that can break a city, but time. Time that rots the granaries. Time that blackens the wells. Time that erodes courage more surely than any blade. Those within the walls hear it as a second heartbeat, alien and merciless, reminding them with every thrum that the enemy does not need to rush. The walls may be of stone, but hunger is sharper than any siege engine. Night falls, and with it comes fever. Bodies too weak to fight the sickness lie in corners, their moans muffled beneath cloaks to keep despair from spreading. Yet despair travels on its own, a sickness that leaps from face to face. And still, in the darkness, voices rise, quiet vows whispered in hidden chambers. We will not yield, not while a single candle burns. Hands clutch rosaries until they splinter, eyes close against visions of surrender. The city is a body broken, yet in its marrow lives defiance. Atop the walls, soldiers peer into the mist, their shapes blurred by smoke and exhaustion. They whisper among themselves, not of victory, but of holding on one more day. Each man carries the memory of someone below, wife, mother, child, and it is that memory that steadies the arrow, that grips the sword hilt when the enemy horns blare. They know that when dawn comes, the sky will bleed again, and they may not. Yet even so, they stand. The crows circle above the corpses unburied outside the walls, their wings black strokes against the pale morning. Their cries pierce the silence between drumbeats, sharper than steel, reminding all who listen that the earth itself hungers. Still the gates hold. Still the walls do not fall. And within that fragile holding, a strange beauty lingers. The faint glow of lanterns carried through darkened alleys, the low hum of a mother's lullaby despite the roar of siege beyond, the sudden laugh of a soldier recalling a memory before war. Small sparks against the void, stubborn in their refusal to be swallowed. Even the last stub of wax lit on an altar becomes a defiance, its flickering flame a refusal to let the night win too easily. But the enemy waits, patient as stone, patient as famine, patient as death itself. Their banners ripple like black waves in the morning wind. Their drums sound again, slow and measured, carrying the weight of inevitability. And so the city trembles, caught between two truths, that each passing day brings it closer to ruin, and that each passing day is a triumph of survival, however bitter. It is in this space between despair and defiance that history is written, not in grand victories, but in the stubborn beating of human hearts that refuse to stop, even as the walls around them crumble. The crimson light fades into gray, and silence takes hold once more, heavier than stone, heavier than chains. Somewhere, in the stillness, a voice prays not for rescue, but for endurance. The words vanish into the cold air, unseen, unheard, yet lingering like smoke against the vault of heaven. And tomorrow, when dawn returns, it will spill again over the city walls, painting the battlements in blood before the first sword is drawn. The night clings to the city like a shroud, a silence so heavy it seems to press against the stone. Frost glitters faintly on the rooftops, catching the weak glow of scattered torches, like dying stars refusing to surrender to the void. Beneath the roofs, in chambers where firewood has long turned to ash, families gather close, huddled against the marrow-cutting cold. The air tastes of soot, of metal, of hunger itself. The wells have grown shallow, their water bitter as rust. Mothers lower buckets with trembling hands, lifting them back with only a thin film of liquid that smells of stone and iron. They bring it home as though carrying relics, though every sip leaves lips cracked, tongues dry, bellies unsettled. Children no longer ask for more. Their eyes are hollow wells themselves, reflecting the stillness of death before it comes. In the market square, where once there were voices hawking honey and iron, silks and salted fish, there is only the groan of wind through broken shutters. The stalls stand skeletal, planks warped by snow and neglect, a graveyard of trade. Somewhere, a sign creaks against a rope, the last ghost of commerce in a city that no longer knows exchange, only survival. From the last baker's oven rises a thread of smoke. The fire burns low, but no bread rises within. Instead, bark stripped from trees, ground bones mixed with dust, shaped into the likeness of food. The hands that knead it move slowly, almost reverently, as though shaping prayers rather than sustenance. And when it is finished, the smell that escapes is not comfort but grief, a fragrance of despair disguised as bread. At the city gates, soldiers pace in silence, their belts cinched tighter, pressing against hollow stomachs that mutter in protest. Fingers tremble around spear shafts, not from fear alone but from weakness, from fatigue. Their faces are shadowed beneath battered helmets, eyes red from smoke, from sleeplessness, from the sight of comrades who once stood beside them but now lie beneath thin layers of earth, covered with frost. Still they hold the walls, not from glory, not from triumph, but because there is nowhere else to stand. Behind them, in a narrow chamber, a mother rocks her infant. The child does not cry. His lips are pale, too weak for sound, his silence sharper than any scream. She rocks him gently, as though motion might coax life back into him, as though the rhythm of her arms might trick the heavens into mercy. Her own lips move, not in lullaby, but in silent plea. Silence has become safer than breath, for in silence the enemy cannot hear their despair. Far across the fields, the enemy prepares another stone. The ropes creak, the wood bends, the sky shudders as the catapult flings its burden. The impact thunders against the walls, shaking dust from chapel ceilings. Icons shatter, painted saints tumbling into splinters of wood, their faces breaking apart on the stones below. Prayers that once rose from those halls now hang in the air as fragments of plaster, as whispers lodged in broken rafters. The city holds, but it is a holding without triumph. Each brick seems mortared with despair, each tower built from endurance rather than victory. It is the kind of holding that blurs into suffering, where survival is a punishment and tomorrow is feared more than today. Men dream not of battle's glory, but of bread, of warmth, of hearing their children laugh again. And yet there are whispers in the deep hours, when bells refuse to ring, when torches gutter and shadows stretch long. A sound threads through the stillness. It begins low, fragile, like the flutter of a bird's wing. A hymn, one voice at first wavering, unsure, then another and another. A prayer from broken throats, daring to rise against the weight of stone and silence. The hymn does not erase hunger. It does not silence the thunder of catapults, nor mend the crumbling icons. But it lingers, defiant, echoing against the ruined walls. It is a sound not of victory, but of resistance. A breath that refuses to die. The soldiers hear it at the gates and grip their spears tighter. The mother hears it and rocks her child with steadier hands. Even the baker, shaping his loaves of bark and bone, hums a fragment of it beneath his breath. The enemy hears nothing, for the hymn is not for them. It is for the sky above the ruin, for the God who watches in silence, for the city itself, whose heart beats faintly but still beats. Outside, the night deepens, stars veiled behind a sky thick with smoke. Beyond the walls, fires burn in enemy camps, where full bellies laugh and sing. Inside, there is no laughter, only whispers and the faint glow of embers. Yet in that contrast lies the mystery of endurance. For though the enemy feasts, it is the starving who dare to sing. As the hymn rises, the walls seem less burdened. The frost on rooftops glimmers like glass beneath the moon. The market stalls, though broken, hold the faint memory of trade, of voices, of life. And the chapel, though cracked and shattered, still shelters the sound of prayer, carried upward with the smoke. The city does not fall tonight, not because it is strong, but because it is stubborn. Because even despair can be a kind of mortar, binding people together when hope has thinned to ash. In the distance, another stone is lifted. Another crash awaits. Another day of hunger. Another night of fear. But for now, the hymn lingers, haunting and fragile, a flame no catapult can extinguish. And as the voices fade into the silence of night, one question drifts like smoke into the sky. How long can a city endure when survival itself has become the cruelest battle of all? The first sound is not the roar of battle, but the hollow creak of a drawbridge pulled shut, sealing the city into its fate. The chains groan like a wounded beast, iron teeth clamping down upon wood. And with that final echo, hope itself feels shackled. A silence follows, a silence heavier than the clamor of war drums. For it is the silence of entrapment. Days stretch into weeks, and weeks dissolve into a blur where time itself seems bruised, marked only by the thunder of stones hurled against walls, and the slow thinning of faces. Children's cheeks grow hollow. Men's shoulders bow as though the very air presses down upon them. Every glance exchanged in the streets carries a question that none dare ask aloud. How long can we endure? The air inside the city tastes of ash and iron. Fires burn not for warmth, but to stave off the rot of meat already spoiled, to scorch away the scent of death before it seeps too deep into the marrow of the people. Smoke clings to the rafters, staining the heavens with a perpetual gray that smothers the memory of sunlight. The taverns are quiet now. Once they roared with song and laughter, but their casks are drained to the dregs. Wooden mugs lie overturned like fallen soldiers. The benches, once groaning beneath the weight of revelers, now cradle the dying. Groans replace ballads. Breath fogs the air not from drunken cheer, but from fevered weakness. In the cloisters, monks scratch fevered records of each passing day. Their hands tremble, ink blots spreading like dark wounds across the parchment. They record not victories or conquests, but hunger and despair, each entry another tally mark carved into the body of the city. Their candles burn low, wax dripping like wasted hours, and still they write, as though words might preserve what flesh cannot. Outside, banners of the enemy whip defiantly in the winter wind. Their colors blaze bright against the pall, a cruel reminder of abundance beyond the walls. Each flap is a taunt, a herald of power. At night, when the fires on the hills flare high, the city can see its jailers feasting. The scent of roasted meat drifts across the frozen air, and it strikes harder than any arrow. Crows gather along the parapets, patient, black-eyed heralds of death. Their claws scrape against stone. Their wings whisper as they shift and wait, knowing that hunger makes carrion of kings as easily as peasants. When the bells toll, they stir, as though answering a summons not from men but from fate. The streets echo with the scrape of shovels. Shallow graves multiply in courtyards and alleys, their earth hard as iron, forcing men to break ground with frozen fingers until nails split and blood stains the snow. Wooden crosses lean drunkenly, like weary sentinels who cannot bear the weight of their vigil. No names are carved, only marks, for there is no time for memory when survival consumes every breath. Yet still the bells toll, not for triumph but for endurance. Each chime shudders through the city like the heartbeat of a dying beast that refuses to still. They ring at dawn, at dusk, at midnight, marking not the hours of worship, but the rhythm of survival. In the night, voices whisper of betrayal. Whispers creep like frost across the stone. Some say the gates should be opened, that mercy from the enemy would spare the children. Others spit at the thought, their cracked lips bleeding with fury. To yield would be worse than death. It would be erasure, the surrender of all the city has stood for. Hunger sharpens divisions sharper than swords. Bread becomes currency, crusts worth more than silver. A mother clutches a stale loaf against her breast as though it were her child, while her child claws at her sleeve, hollow-eyed and begging. Rats vanish from the alleys, hunted to extinction, their absence more terrible than their presence ever was. Dogs are tethered behind doors, their barks silenced with fear, for everyone knows what will come when hunger deepens. The enemy waits. They do not need to storm the walls. Starvation is the quieter, crueler blade. Their torches burn at the horizon, circling the city like wolves around a dying stag. Siege engines rest idle, hulking shapes against the stars, for time itself has been turned into their weapon. And still, within the walls, life clings. Children play with pebbles, their laughter thin but real. Lovers steal moments beneath cloisters, their embraces trembling, fragile as candle flames. Priests raise broken chalices toward heaven, their prayers cracked yet fierce, voices carrying like smoke through the rafters. Each day becomes a ritual. Shovels scrape, bells toll, fires smolder. The city bleeds, but it does not bow. Pride, stubborn as stone, holds the walls upright when mortar crumbles. Loyalty binds neighbors closer, even as hunger drives them apart. The paradox of survival: we fight together, we suffer alone. A man kneels at the gates, his forehead pressed to the cold wood, whispering to the iron hinges as if they were saints. He begs for the strength to keep them closed. In another corner, a woman carves a prayer into her own skin, believing the pain might barter with heaven for salvation. And in the darkness of cellars, soldiers polish swords they may never wield, their blades gleaming with useless defiance. Time folds in upon itself. Days have no names. Nights stretch without stars. What remains is sound. The hammer of stones against the wall, the crack of frost splitting wood, the rasp of breath that is always too shallow. And beneath it all, the bells. Always the bells. But what is endurance if not defiance made flesh? The city, though gaunt and trembling, refuses to vanish. Even in hunger there is memory. Even in weakness there is will. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the world continues. Green fields still bloom, rivers still flow. To endure is to insist that one day the gates will open again, not to surrender, but to sunlight. The bells toll once more, carrying through smoke and silence, and for a moment it feels less like mourning and more like a promise. A vow whispered into the frozen air. We will outlast the darkness. And as the sound fades into the night, the enemy banners ripple against the wind, shadows stretching longer, closer. The siege is not yet broken, but neither is the spirit within the walls. The chapter closes not with triumph, but with a question. How long can pride hold against hunger, and at what cost? Rain lashes against the stone, a merciless drumbeat that drowns the cries of the wounded. Each drop strikes like an accusation, mixing with blood that seeps through cracks in the cobbles, painting the city in streaks of crimson mud. The gates groan under the ram's assault, timbers splintering with the sound of bones about to snap. Every shudder of the wall is felt in the marrow of those who wait behind it. They do not know if the next blow will be the one that breaks them, or if it is only the prelude to a darker silence. Inside the walls, despair and defiance wrestle in equal measure. Councilmen huddle in chambers lit by flickering torches, their voices sharp, edged with panic. Grain dwindles by the hour. A sack of barley is guarded like a crown. The lords speak of rations and sacrifices, but their words taste of hypocrisy, for their tables remain heavier than those of the poor. Soldiers, weary beyond exhaustion, beg for rest, their eyes hollow, their limbs trembling like reeds in a storm. And beyond them, the common folk crowd the squares, begging not for bread alone, but for mercy. Mercy that their masters have none to give. Smoke rises in slow, grim spirals from hastily built pyres. Not from battle but from plague. It slips past barricades and armored lines, unseen and untouchable, a more ruthless conqueror than any sword. The pestilence stalks silently through chambers and chapels, leaving bodies stiff and cold by dawn. Mothers cover their children's mouths with trembling hands, whispering prayers to saints who no longer seem to hear. No fortress wall can hold back such a foe. In the chapels, candles gutter, bending low in the draft of unseen wings. Knights kneel in their iron shells, gaunt, pale, whispering vows that tremble like farewells. Some strike their chests in penance until their knuckles bleed. Others weep in the shadows, ashamed of their tears, yet unable to hold them back. The incense thickens the air, sweet and suffocating, clinging to every breath like a final absolution. Children, too small to wield a blade, claw at mortar between the stones. They gnaw it as if stone could fill their bellies. Their eyes, vast and unblinking, are black pools of terror, reflecting fires that burn in streets once meant for markets and games. Their silence is more haunting than any scream, silence that settles deep in the bones of the city, as if it too knows the end is near. Each street has become a tomb with breathing walls. Every step echoes too quickly, swallowed by stones that remember the dead. The alleys whisper with the hiss of rain and the shuffle of unseen feet. Doors slam shut at the hint of movement, for no one trusts the sound of a neighbor's cough. Yet even in this suffocating gloom, something stirs, faint but unbroken. It is the low chant of determination, a murmur rising from cracked lips, from hollowed bellies, from calloused hands that still grip shattered spears. It rumbles beneath the grief, steady as thunder rolling on the horizon. For all the plague has stolen, for all the hunger that gnaws, the will of the people clings to the ruins as if ruin itself were sacred. On the walls, archers stand like shadows. Their bowstrings hum with weariness, yet they still notch arrows. Each shaft released is a thread tying them to life, to resistance. Below, women melt scraps of metal, forging rough bolts and nails into weapons that look more like farm tools than instruments of war. The old tell stories in hushed tones, not to soothe children, but to remind them of who they are, and what cannot be taken, even in the jaws of despair. In the darkened chambers, whispers turn into arguments, arguments into threats. One lord calls for surrender, another for defiance. A priest speaks of divine punishment, while a soldier spits at the floor, declaring that hunger is no judgment of heaven but of men. The chamber becomes a furnace of fear, yet amid the fury, a truth hardens. There is no way out but through. Night falls heavy, cloaking the city in black. The enemy outside does not sleep. Torches burn like a crown of fire around the walls. Their chants echo through the rain, a chorus of hunger answered by the growl of drums. Yet the city does not answer. Within, silence reigns, not from peace, but from the weight of endurance. Somewhere, in the heart of this dying place, a woman kneels in the mud. She cradles her son's head against her breast, rocking him as if he were an infant, though his body has already grown cold. Around her, the pyre smolders, smoke carrying the scent of ash and grief. She does not weep. Her face is stone, carved by something older than sorrow. She presses her lips to his brow and whispers words that cannot be heard, only felt, carried on the rain like a vow. High above, the bells toll once, then fall silent. Their echoes spread over the rooftops, seeping into every corner, every wound. For some, it is the sound of an ending. For others, the sound of resolve. The city listens, breath held, as though waiting for a voice to follow. None comes. Only the rain, the blood, the silence. Yet beneath it all, the chant returns, stronger now. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady. The chant of those who refuse to yield, who believe that even ruin may be hallowed ground if it is held with courage. The chant rolls through the narrow streets, touches the battlements, seeps into the stones themselves. The city is not dead, not yet, and as the night deepens, the gates shudder again under the ram. The timbers crack. Sparks leap from torches in the storm. The enemy presses closer, believing the end is near. But within the walls, a strange stillness takes hold. The people stand, hollow and hungry, diseased and dying, yet upright. For even in their ruin, they will not bow. The rain falls harder. The mud thickens. The blood spreads darker. And somewhere, in the hush between thunder and the next crash of the ram, the city itself seems to draw breath. The chapter closes not in silence, but in that breath, a pause before the storm, a space in which the future trembles. Will the gates shatter, or will the will of the broken prove unbreakable? The answer waits in the darkness beyond, where hope and despair walk side by side. The morning mist clings to the broken city like a burial shroud. It drifts through alleyways and over shattered rooftops, softening the edges of ruin but never concealing it. Beneath its pale cover, the scars of the night are everywhere. Blood darkening the cobbles, beams of charred timber jutting like ribs from collapsed houses, and the faint smolder of fires that refuse to die. The mist hides nothing. It only mourns, like a veil laid gently over a corpse. Beyond the walls, shadows stir. Siege towers, monstrous in their design, loom against the skyline. They rise higher with each dawn, their timbers creaking as though they themselves are alive, groaning with hunger for the city's flesh. The clang of hammers rings out from the enemy camp, forging death with every stroke. Iron arrowheads, barbed hooks, spears meant to pierce both body and spirit. Their rhythm becomes the city's heartbeat, one of dread. Between those metallic beats comes the thinner, more terrible sound. The wails of the lost, those who slipped away in the night and were hurriedly covered with straw before the sun could reveal the truth of their number. The stench of decay lingers beneath the coverings, mingling with smoke, mingling with fear. Inside the castle, once radiant with light and laughter, silence reigns. The tapestries that had once told tales of glory now hang limp and faded, their threads blackened by soot, their woven knights and maidens blurred into shadows. In the great hall, the long tables stand barren. Dust thickens where bread once lay, where wine once spilled during laughter that rang long into the night. The hearth, which had once been the heart of the castle, coughs thin smoke that drifts like ghostly fingers up to the rafters. The air is bitter, heavy with absence. The people who remain move like shades themselves. Their backs are bent, not from age but from hunger's relentless weight. Children press close to their mothers, eyes wide, cheeks hollowed, clutching scraps of cloth as if they were treasure. Men who once carried swords now carry buckets of stagnant water, or baskets of moldy grain rationed to the handful. Every sound jolts them, the creak of timber, the groan of stone as walls settle beneath their own exhaustion. Each noise is a reminder. The fortress that protects them may soon become their tomb. At night, the cruelty of the besiegers sharpens. Torches burn in their camp, their glow flickering against the towers of war. From those flames come songs, mocking, jeering, cruel as bells tolling over graves. The melodies drift on the wind, slipping into the city's streets and bedrooms, into dreams. They twist in the ears of the weary like knives, reminding all who listen that their enemy does not simply seek conquest. They seek humiliation, and yet the walls endure. Watchfires still burn upon the ramparts, though the hands that tend them tremble. The guards are gaunt, their lips cracked, their cheeks sunken, but their eyes are steady. The flames lick against the night air, casting halos around figures who stand as both sentinel and sacrifice. Their resolve glows brighter than the fire itself. Below, the city starves. Above, the city still watches. It is a kind of prayer, their light against the darkness, their defiance against the slow crushing of hope. In the kitchens, broth is scraped from the bottom of cauldrons. Rats, once despised, are now caught and roasted, bones cracked open for marrow. Old grain, long stored in damp sacks, is boiled into paste, fed to children who swallow without complaint. Hunger gnaws at every rib, sharpens every cheekbone, but no one speaks of surrender. For to surrender is to hand over not just life, but soul. And so they choose hunger, knowing it will claim them one by one, but refusing the finality of chains. The church bells, cracked but unbroken, ring each dawn. Their sound is hollow now, thin as a breath, yet it carries across the mist. People gather beneath the vaulted stone arches, kneeling on cold floors worn smooth by centuries. The priest's voice shakes, not with fear but with exhaustion, as he calls upon saints whose bones lie buried beneath the altar. The candles flicker weakly, their wax dripping into pools of hardened sorrow. Yet here, in this house of echoes, there remains a seed of faith. Children clutch at rosaries carved from bone. Mothers whisper names of the dead into the shadows, as though the walls themselves might carry their words upward. Outside, the towers edge closer. Their monstrous silhouettes blot out the horizon. Arrows begin to fall more frequently now, slicing through the mist with a hiss like snakes. They lodge in roofs, in doors, in flesh. The city answers with stones hurled from weary arms, with boiling pitch poured from battlements. Each defense is a scream of survival, yet with each passing day, the screams grow quieter. Still a vow remains. It whispers through the cracks of the city's bones, carried in the voices of the few who still believe that morning will come without fire. They whisper it when they pass each other in narrow streets. They whisper it when they bury their dead in shallow graves at dawn. They whisper it when they stand upon the walls, watching the horizon burn with enemy fire. It is not a vow spoken aloud. It is too fragile for that. It is a vow spoken inward, where the enemy cannot hear. I will not bend. I will not bow. Not while breath remains. The siege presses on. The enemy prepares to unleash their monstrous towers, to send them grinding across the earth, crushing soil and stone until they meet the walls. Inside, the people brace. They tie rags around their mouths to block the stench of death. They kiss their children's foreheads and press them into shadowed corners. They sharpen what few blades remain, edges nicked and rusted, but still dangerous when wielded by desperate hands. And through it all, the mist lingers. Each morning it returns, cloaking the city anew, as though heaven itself seeks to grant the dying one more hour of mercy, one more shroud of concealment. But mist cannot hold back war. Mist cannot silence the clash of iron or the cries of the broken. Mist can only soften the edges, never the truth. And the truth is this: the city is dying. Yet in its dying, it reveals something greater than stone. For stone cracks, stone crumbles, stone falls beneath fire. But the vow whispered in hunger, in fear, in silence, that vow endures. Stronger than stone, stronger than hunger, stronger even than death. And as dawn breaks once more, the mist parts just enough to reveal what waits beyond. The towers are closer now. The enemy chants rise in a tide of cruel anticipation. The gates quake beneath the weight of the inevitable. But on the wall, a single torch flares brighter. This flame gutters, sways, but refuses to die. The guard holding it leans upon the stone, his body weak, his spirit unbroken. The fire burns on, spilling its glow into the mist. A signal, a vow. The city whispers with him, silent yet unyielding. And somewhere beyond the gates, in the enemy's camp, a horn begins to sound, long, low, and terrible. The world holds its breath. The siege is about to break. Twilight gathers over the battlements, staining the sky with bruised violet as shadows crawl into every street. The city breathes in shallow gasps. Its heart is weak, but it still beats. Every stone of its walls seems to tremble with exhaustion, and yet they stand, unyielding though cracked and bleeding. In the square, gallows stand ready, erected not for enemies but for traitors among their own, those who would open gates for bread and survival. The executioner's rope sways in the wind, a silent warning more feared than swords, for betrayal has become the enemy within. Every whispered word is suspect. Eyes dart in silence. A loaf of bread passed from one hand to another could mean loyalty or treason. Hunger gnaws deeper than any blade, and in hunger's hollow grip, men will sell their souls for crumbs. Wells are watched with suspicion, for poison has become another weapon, seeping into cups as surely as arrows pierce flesh. To drink is to risk death. To thirst is to court madness. The enemy beyond the walls waits with patience, their banners unmoving, their campfires smoldering like distant stars. Watching, waiting, certain that time will do their work for them. Within the city, desperation sharpens like a blade. Women grind acorns into bitter paste, scraping the bottom of empty sacks, whispering prayers that taste of ash. Children gnaw on leather straps softened in boiling water, their small teeth working against nothingness, eyes too hollow for tears. Men dream of fields they will never see again. Green pastures now only phantoms dancing behind closed eyelids, mocking them with what lies forever beyond the gates. The church doors remain open, though even faith is fraying. Candles burn though the wax dwindles low, their flickering flames weeping down into pools that harden like frozen tears. Incense thickens the air, but it cannot mask the reek of sickness, the rot of unwashed flesh, the stench of bodies failing under the weight of famine. Still they kneel, still they pray. For some, prayer is all that remains, their last weapon against despair. For others, it is ritual without hope, a hand clutching rosary beads simply to keep from shaking. Above it all, the ravens gather, their wings black banners of their own, circling with hunger as steady as the armies below. They perch on spires, on roofs, on the gallows themselves, their eyes glinting with cruel patience. They do not hurry. They know what is coming. They always do. The silence of the siege is louder than any battlefield. No clash of steel, no trumpet calls, only the wind sighing against stone and the slow, steady toll of hunger. Mothers hush their children not with songs but with the promise that tomorrow will bring bread, though they no longer believe the words themselves. Fathers sit in doorways, staring at streets empty of laughter, clutching tools they cannot wield and swords too dull to matter. And in the shadows, there are whispers. Whispers that someone will slip out tonight, someone will raise the gates, someone will choose life over honor. The gallows stand to answer such whispers. At dawn, the city gathers to watch a man climb the scaffold, rope awaiting him like a noose woven by his own hunger. He does not cry out. He does not beg. The crowd watches with eyes dulled by famine, too weary even for hatred. The trapdoor falls, the body jerks, and the rope creaks like a sigh of inevitability. The warning is clear. Hunger may gnaw, thirst may crush, but betrayal will not be forgiven. Yet still hunger gnaws, still thirst crushes, and desperation is a beast that cannot be chained forever. Night falls heavy. In the alleys, soldiers of the watch drag their boots through mud blackened with refuse. Torches sputter in the damp, throwing shadows that stretch and bend like demons across the walls. Somewhere a child coughs, a thin, rattling sound that echoes longer than it should. Somewhere else, a woman screams, her voice broken by grief, cut short as though swallowed by the dark. The city itself has become a living graveyard, each corner a tomb, each street a dirge. But even in this suffocating despair, there are sparks that refuse to die. In one home, a boy clings to a wooden sword, his hands raw but determined, whispering that he will fight when the gates fall. In another, a woman lights her last candle and places it in the window, not to pray but to defy the night itself. And in the church, an old priest with trembling hands lifts a chalice empty of wine, raising it high as though it were full, daring anyone to see only the void. The city clings to itself, unwilling to surrender even as ruin claims it stone by stone. Walls crumble at the edges, roofs sag, and fires burn out for lack of fuel. But the people endure. They do not bow. They do not yield. Still, questions linger in every heart. How long can defiance outlast famine? How long can loyalty endure when the body itself rebels? How long before the gates are not forced open by enemy steel, but unlatched from within by desperate hands? As the night deepens, the wind carries a single sound across the rooftops, the toll of a distant bell. Slow, measured, hollow, not a call to prayer, not a call to arms. A warning, a dirge, a heartbeat echoing through the city's veins. And so the city waits, between hunger and steel, between loyalty and betrayal, between faith and despair. It waits. Every breath is borrowed, every day a gamble. Above the battlements, ravens drift against the violet sky, their wings spread wide, their circles unbroken. They know the dawn will come again, but whether it will bring bread or blood or surrender, no one can say.